I guess I was always interested in fitness sports growing up. I grew up playing rugby. I know you play American football over there. It's kind of similar, but I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen rugby before. So, because my father's English, I'm half English, half Chinese, and so rugby was the big sport growing up, and we had to do a lot of training for that. Obviously, just besides actually playing the sport, but a lot of running, a lot of strength work.
Mm.
Um, so I did my university at Oxford in the UK, which is also a big rugby playing university, and played there and really, really enjoyed it. But my first career was not doing sports and fitness. I actually used to work in finance, and because I studied economics at Oxford, and it was probably the done thing to do was to get a job in the city of London after that. So that's what I ended up doing, right? And so I worked. My first job was doing accounting, believe it or not, and I worked at one of the big accounting firms in London
Wow.
for a few years. Yeah, yeah. And then I decided to move to China 20 years ago. Originally, that was to learn Chinese because even though I'm half Chinese, I grew up just speaking in English. My parents thought that was going to be better because at that time, still there were way more opportunities in Western-speaking countries
Mhm.
than in China. China at that time was still like this really poor agricultural country.
Mhm.
Unbelievable, right? So,
Yeah.
but I moved in 2004 to China to start learning Chinese, and after I'd got the basics of the language, I continued working in finance in China. So I did another few years doing uh, investment banking in China.
Okay.
And then I had yeah, yeah. So I have a very unusual background for someone who's doing what I do now, but the
Right.
work was just not really fulfilling me. I had a really I just couldn't get into it the way like I knew my other colleagues did and a lot of other people did, and I knew I needed another change. And then I decided, like almost like 15 years ago now, about 13 years ago or so, to to go and do what I really enjoyed, which was fitness.
Mhm.
So I did a big career change. I went to study in Australia for a few months because they also have a pretty good fitness market down there, and it was closer to China, relatively speaking. So I went down to Australia for a few months, learned a lot down there about training, about sports fitness, and then came back to China and started a business doing personal training. And I've been doing strength training, fitness, working with clients ever since then.
Wow.
And as you mentioned just now, yeah, I'm also an author now. I guess I have this pretty academic background for someone doing what I do, and so I've always put in so much of my time every week to just reading and finding out what people are doing and looking at a lot of interesting research on all things to do with wellness, right? And then combined with all the experience I accumulated working with my personal training clients and listening to the sort of the real issues that they thought about, they faced, and trying my best to explain in simple language what my take was on those issues.
Mhm.
I accumulated this huge amount of knowledge, and I finally turned that into a book, which got released this year in China.
Wow, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. So, and that's been, I would say, reasonably successful. I mean, so book publishing now is hard. Not that many people read books, right? More people do this. They listen to podcasts,
Right, right. Yeah.
which is great. I mean, I love doing podcasts too. But I'm traditional. I still read a lot of books as well,
Mhm.
and so my first book has done pretty well in China, and I'm actually now working on my second book. So really, really
That's
excited
awesome.
about that.
So how long did that whole process take from the start of you writing the book to the completion and publishing?
Wow, God. So it's a few years really. I so my first book actually was because as soon as I started working in fitness, I started to write monthly articles, and I wrote for a few magazines. So the biggest one I worked for was Tatler, which I don't know if that's in the U.S. as well. It's a very old traditional magazine. So and because by writing these articles, I also started to put together the basis of an overall, of an overall theory, if you like, an overall, set of suggestions on wellness. And so you could say, like, I was working on my book started from working on it from 10 years ago. But really, but that was just a collection of articles, I guess. Then seriously, I started thinking about turning it into a book from about 3 years ago. But it's super hard, even if you've got a great book idea, to get a publisher. So I had a bit of luck. I had one of my clients was a literary agent, and she just pushed me. She said, you've written some good articles. You're so passionate about what you're doing. You should really try and find a book publisher and publish a book. And she really pushed me on this. So I said, okay, all right, I will do it just to amuse you and see if it's possible. I was kind of skeptical. I didn't think I'd be able to get a publisher. It's just hard these days. So I put together my what I thought was the key theory into a structure, and then I turned that into a book proposal. My agent managed to find a publisher, and the publisher paid me in advance, which is just so rare now,
Wow.
right? Now most people have to self-publish or put
Right.
up all the costs themselves of, the editing work and the formatting, the design work and all that. So I actually managed to get a publishing deal, and so I'm really grateful for that. So my publisher in China is called New Wave, and they're actually the biggest private publishing house in China. So they paid,
Oh,
their editor, he just loved what I was writing about. He must have read some of the same books that I'd read and had some kind of similar thoughts. So we were on the same wavelength. And so, he really supported it. And he told his buying department, pay this guy the money, give him the money so that he finishes this book. So I was really grateful for that. And then it took me, but even after getting the publishing deal, it took me probably another 6, 9 months to finish writing the book. And then I write in English, and this book was published in Chinese. So we then needed to translate it, edit the Chinese, and then get approval to publish in China.
yeah. Wow.
So yeah, it was a long process, but we finally got there this year.
Yeah,
No
that's
kidding.
well, that's awesome. I mean, obviously, and it's funny because Dylan and I talk about similar things in terms of how things are created, how much is involved in actually bringing
Yeah,
something to life, whether it's a product, in our case, an energy drink, a performance drink. A lot of
yeah,
people they just see the end product, right? And they're like, oh, like that
yeah,
must not be that hard. And it's probably similar in creating a book and publishing a book, right? There's so many levels and steps to
yeah.
get it to ultimately, be for sale for people to buy and actually read themselves. You know what I mean? And I'm sure not a lot of people, realize that from the outside looking in.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. It
yeah,
was a struggle to get that over the line, but
yeah.
really glad.
Yeah, and I know a lot of things led to that point, right? That maybe all the experiences that you've had in your life that ultimately led to this point of you writing your own book. Maybe it didn't happen if you didn't take that leap into the fitness space per se. So to go
For
back in
sure.
time a little bit, so in the investment
Yeah,
banking, accounting side of things, I think there's a strong correlation here about identity, like self identity, like what's your passion, what do you want to go for in life, and obviously in your case you didn't really see that as your future in investment banking or accounting or whatever it might be. And
yeah,
I find that in sports, right, as athletes, growing up it becomes your identity, right? And once people have to move on from that sport, which it inevitably does, you have to move on and find something else. You come to this identity crisis period in your life. So I guess for you, going back in time to when you were in the accounting side of things and the investment banking, at what
yeah.
point did you realize like this isn't for me anymore? I got to find something new.
So I talk about this in my book, and there was a trigger moment. I guess there always is when somebody makes a big decision,
Hmm.
and it's crazy because what it was actually being offered partnership in the firm I was working. So I
Mm,
was in this private investment bank, which was doing well, and I was one of the youngest directors of the firm. I, I didn't, I wasn't passionate the same way as I am now about what I do, but I still did my work responsibly. And, the chairman said to me, look, we think you've got the potential to become one of the partners, take an equity stake in the firm. That would be a big step, and we really hope that you will consider that. And if you keep up the hard work, this is it, right? And that was actually the trigger for me to decide, actually, that's not what I want.
oh,
I I knew that if that was kind of the point of no return, because if I became an equity partner in an investment bank, uh, there was no turning back after that. Then I'd be
that's
really
it.
tied in.
Yeah.
I'd have a great, there'd be a lot of upside. I'd have huge financial return and everything. But I knew it wasn't for me.
Mm,
So bizarrely, that ended up being the trigger for me to just consider what I wanted to do for the next 5, 10 years, and then sit down with my bosses and say, actually, I'm really sorry. Uh, I really thank you for the opportunity and all the trust you put in me, but I want to go and try something else.
yeah. And what was that
So
experience like? Like in terms of that conversation that you have, because obviously I feel like an opportunity like that doesn't come all the time, right? Not everybody's going to
no,
get the opportunity. Most people would go head
absolutely,
first into an opportunity like that, but for you,
yeah.
I went the other way. So I guess what was the conversation like that you had with your boss?
That was really tough as well because I have the enormous respect for the people I used to work with. Actually, I'm still in contact with them, and although that conversation where I told them I wanted to leave, that wasn't too happy. That wasn't such an easy conversation to have.
Yeah.
Uh, Now they see that I'm really enjoying what I do, and that I'm really passionate about this career and the positive impact I'm having on my circle now and my community, my followers in China. I think they're really happy for me too. So I think you will have that in your life this time when you have an awkwardness with people, and it's not because you don't like each other, you don't respect each other. It's just you want to do different things.
Mhm.
But once you resolve that, in the end, you can still get along very well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it is fascinating how many things can happen in life. Like I guarantee you, and it's gonna be the same thing for us. Like we're 24 years old right now, and I'm sure 20 years from now, we're probably gonna look back
Yeah.
at like how is that even possible that we ended up there, right? And I think that it's the
Right.
same for everybody. Like as much as you can try and project out into the future of where you want to be or where you think you'll be, it's all going to change, right? Because there's so many, whether it's an opportunity or hurdles that come about, which is inevitable in life, right? Those things are always going to happen. It's just a matter of like
Absolutely.
one decision, right? You made one decision of, hey, this isn't for me anymore. I'm gonna find something that I'm truly passionate about that can make me feel fulfilled in life and wake up every day excited to go to work, right? Even though it's not technically
Yes.
work, you love what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I don't now looking back, I feel definitely it was the right decision. It was very hard at the time. Also, another thing I should mention is whenever you make that kind of big career decision, because if you've invested, 8, 10 years in a certain career, you're already at a certain level
Mhm.
in that area, right? And then if when you change, you've got to go right back to level one, right? To level zero even. You've got to then retrain from the ground up. And it's humbling because not only are you starting from zero, you feel like you're 10 years behind because the people you're now suddenly compete, they're 10 years younger than you, right? So you're entering the market as a trainer in well, I was in my 30s at the time. And you got these 20-year-olds who, a lot of them are in better physical shape than you are.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is, right? So yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you think about it too, like stepping into a new realm, there's all hindsight's always 2020. I mean, everybody
Absolutely.
you get 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, you could be like, I should have done this, I should have made this decision. But was there any point in time in that decision that you made, that big decision to basically start from scratch, where you were like,
Yeah.
the right move? Or, was there ever a thought in your mind that happened like that?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the first year when you're really struggling to make ends meet as a trainer. You're like busting your ass to get one client, right? Or
Mhm.
two clients, and and then you're like, holy crap, this month I made this much. That's about 2% of what I used to be making, right? And you're like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling when you come from a very good position in whatever job to then just trying to make it in a new career. And
Mhm.
so there were definitely times like that when I was just literally trying to find my first few clients to work for. Uh, where I felt, geez, was this the right decision after all? But I guess that's all part of the story. It ends up being, funny talking about it now. We all just have to go through that sort of struggle in
Mhm.
whatever decision we make. And I think having to focus that hard because you know you've made this decision makes you take things super seriously, and that's in a way was helpful for me in the beginning as a personal trainer. I was so concerned about how whether or not I'd made the right decision, sort of feeling like I needed to prove myself in this new industry. I took every session like so seriously, like this was the most important event to ever happen, right? And
Mhm.
I think that really transferred into my clients really felt that, like they knew I was more concerned about the outcome of every workout than they were. I was just like super involved, super invested. That very quickly after I got my first, two or three clients, that became 20, 30 clients in a short space of time. So,
Mhm.
in the end, all things worked out.
Absolutely. And I was just about to say, like, how was that progression? Obviously, it was clearly the right decision today. You're still doing it. It's going very well. How did that progress for you personally? And at what point did you kind of realize, okay, you know what, I did make the right decision. The work that I put in is, it's paying off at this point.
Yeah, at what point? That's another good question. Uh, Perhaps maybe it was the point. Well, there were a few milestones, I would say. When I got
Mhm.
my first writing gig with Tapper magazine, that was the first time like a big magazine said, "Yeah, we're interested in having you share your fitness articles
Mhm.
in our publication." That was a big milestone. My personal training studio. So the personal training studio I founded was called Prime. We also won a bunch of awards. I got put forward and then won the Entrepreneur of the Year award for in the in the British Business Awards in China, which was a really big
Wow.
milestone as well. And then later on, we actually got an award from a Chinese kind of like they choose like best in each industry kind of like thing, and we also won one of those awards. So winning these kind of awards, getting first like and I guess my first interview in a major like me being interviewed in a major magazine I was in. Uh, that was also another step. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I also started after about 5 years as a trainer. That's when I started to get some celebrity clients. Getting my yeah. So uh, you won't know any of these guys because they're all Chinese, but like uh, so I started working with Li Jian, who's a very famous singer, and then Yao Chen, a really famous actress. So Yao Chen in China, she'd be like, I don't know, Natalie Portman or something like that
Oh,
in the
wow.
US. Like, yeah, I mean, at one point she had the Guinness World Records for the most followers, like, ever. Like, she has like 80 million, 90 million followers in China. She's like this huge, huge actress. And I trained with her for 5 years. And
That's awesome.
by the time I started to get to work with these like major stars, that was also another really obviously important, meaningful
Mhm.
milestone because then I knew that the work I was doing wouldn't just translate into their own benefit and their own improvements and so on, but because they shared all aspects of their lifestyle with their fans, it
Hmm.
would then have a knock on effect on a lot more people in China.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's crazy. And not to keep going back to this kind of transition point, but I think there's a lot of value to unpack in it. And,
Yeah,
transitioning to a new career and making such a massive decision like that, I think a lot of people are hesitant to ultimately make the decision that will feel best to them because of external forces, whether it's family
yes,
or friends, given their 2 cents and their input into a decision like that. For you, were there any sort of external forces that were like, hey, maybe this isn't a great idea for you to do something like this? Like, you have a great paying job, you have a bright future. Was there
yeah.
any kind of that conversation going on?
There were a few people like you could tell some of the friends that I had at the time were a little bit confused about it, and maybe some of them uh, jokingly in a way, but like questioning me whether this was really the right decision or not. Um, but thankfully, my parents, my close circle of friends, and my parents were very supportive actually. Um, so I'm very grateful for that as well because I think yeah, you're right. If you don't have a certain amount of backing and support when you make that type of decision, it can be pretty tough. But in a way, maybe it also helps you identify who your real friends are because
Absolutely.
yeah, I was in this quite a prestigious job with a good level of income, and then I was changing to maybe not such a glamorous job and not such a high income level, especially in the beginning. And if people look down on you because of that, maybe they're not really your crowd, right? Your crew.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's okay. I feel like my core friends, my close friends, they didn't change. So
Mhm.
that's all good.
Yeah, which you're right. I mean, I feel like decisions like that. I mean, I've had those circumstances in my life too, where it's just a new level of you, right? And if the other people aren't willing to level up with you, it's like that's it.
Yeah,
You have to find more people that are like-minded, and that's the whole basis of Underdog. Like, our brand is built around like-minded individuals, people that want to improve, people that want self-growth, and to be the best version of themselves. Like, that's the ultimate goal of the community.
sure. That's awesome. I love the name, by the way, Underdog.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you, thank you.
it's good.
But yeah, so and the other thing too that I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about is in terms of like fitness. Like, obviously, so I'm assuming you already had a basis of fitness. You were going to the gym or training or whatever it might be to
Yeah.
ultimately take the leap into full time into that kind of a career. So I guess, what is your background in that side of things? When did you really start to get involved in the fitness space?
Yeah. So, like I said, growing up, sports, rugby, and then we did like fitness training for that. And
Mhm.
but you know, gosh, I'm gonna have to reveal my age here. I'm 46 now. Growing up in the playing rugby in the 90s, I would say sports science, especially in the UK, was fairly limited. So it was pretty basic stuff that we were
Right.
doing then for strength for our rugby strength and conditioning.
Mhm.
Um, to be honest, a lot of it was like, just wouldn't be that dissimilar to what a bodybuilder would do. It was like these,
Mhm.
you know, very basic lifts, bench pressing and deadlifting and squatting, like I guess a bit of powerlifting, and that's pretty much all I learned when as a rugby player. Then like yeah, after I started working in finance, I would just go to the gym by myself to stay in shape. but I don't think I really learnt that much as a non-fitness professional. I think like most people, like most regular gym goers, they just go to the gym and do what everyone else is doing, right? So I probably did like most of the stuff that I learned when I was a rugby player, and then just had a look at what the other guys in the gym were doing and try to copy along some of that.
Right,
Yeah.
So
right.
I don't think I had a any real professional idea of what I did until I went to retrain. Um, in Australia, and I did a 2 month course, a personal training course down there, and that's when I really started to appreciate how complex fitness can be, and the importance of having programming in your workouts, and the importance of you know movement variations, like how the way a lot of people train is just it's actually really limited, and it
Mhm.
may give them a very immediate impact, like they can see some muscle growth, which is which is great, obviously, but they're not really building a strong body capable of doing uh, lots of different things. Mostly getting some aesthetic benefits from their workouts, but not much else besides. Um, so I guess it wasn't until like I went to study full time as a fitness
Mhm.
professional, I really started to appreciate the complexities. And then from there on, I just kept leveling up. Like I just kept on enrolling in more courses, and because just thirst for knowledge, wanting to find out more. I think one of the most like transformative experiences I had as a trainer was learning hardstyle kettlebell training from the RKC, sort of Russian Kettlebell Challenge. So there was a great coach who came over from the US, Andrea Duquesne. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but or I don't know if you ever know much about hardstyle kettlebell. But I found that system just so convincing, so powerful because it was kind of teaching a movement philosophy, and in a way, I just never really appreciated just everything about it, like the way you breathe to match your movements, and
Mhm.
the emphasis on getting your body into certain positions, and then the thinking about movements is just going through these positions and using your breath, training barefoot as well, like because the emphasis they placed on being able to use your whole body for balance,
Mhm.
which is central to kettlebell training.
Mhm.
That I would say was a transformative experience for me as a trainer. So I'm really grateful to my first kettlebell coach for that.
For sure. And I saw a bit of that on your Instagram as well as the clubs. And was that kind of a
Oh
progression
yeah,
into the clubs? I find it super interesting and becoming more popular too. Like even, I don't know if you've heard of the, I guess, fitness influencer, John Call. His Instagram goes by Juji Mufu. He was one of the first ones I saw with a lot of the like club routines and shoulder mobility and like the
yes,
real science behind it. Like it's at first glance it can seem like a bit of an act, but then you really get into like the flow and the mobility of the
yeah,
joints. It's
yeah,
quite interesting. So was the kettlebell kind of an
yes.
intro into that? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once I learned about, just being able to use a simple device and train the whole body,
Hmm.
uh, it got me wondering, like, about whether, we really needed all these big gym machines and barbells. And in a way, I kind of felt, actually, I kind of prefer this really simple tools. I kind of felt there was something more natural about those type of movements. And then that got really made me really exploring about other types of similar training. And yes, clubs and maces, as we found out to some extent, things like Bulgarian bags and other like functional training devices. All of my interest, I guess, came started off with kettlebells, and then I started to look at everything else. And then clubs became just a really big thing for me once I discovered them. Um, so yeah, and I yeah, like you were talking about shoulder mobility, I just came to realize a lot of the problems people have with their shoulders just come from a overuse of these same bodybuilding movements, which we
Mm-hmm.
somehow became the norm in the fitness industry. In the I think around the 60s and the 70s, to get the most amount of muscle, you wanted to use a heavy barbell and move it in a straight line. That was essentially bodybuilding theory. And but what that obviously overlooked was the shoulder is not really designed to do this kind of movement. Like the shoulder is a ball and socket joint. It's designed for us to throw things and to hit things. So that's why we have this huge and powerful opposable thumb on the hands, right? To be able to grab something, a rock or a club, and to rotate the shoulder to release power, right? So it became, and then I just read about all these, these physical therapists and all these people who've been saying this for years. Well, the reason we're seeing such rates of shoulder injuries in the gyms is because we're just not using the shoulder for the way it's designed. And
Mm-hmm.
then, yeah, it just really made sense to me. And then I started to find out more about clubs. And the thing which was really powerful about when I learned about clubs was, again, looking at the history of clubs. So club training might be the oldest form of strength training. I think it is, having done quite a bit of research onto this now.
Mm-hmm.
And you looked at what it was used for. It was used by these warriors preparing for battle, right? And they needed to do something which closely resembled the type of movements they would need in to use in combat in battle situations.
Mm-hmm.
So you had this system which still used in Iran, where they would hold these two clubs and swing them around the shoulders, whoosh, like this type of movement, which would closely resemble how they would, strike with a sword or with a club or a hammer or whatever in battle, and their other hand would be there as holding their shield. You had a shield in one hand, your weapon in the other hand, and that's their way of training. And it just kind of made sense to me. Wow, so this is the original form of strength training, and this is actually closely reflects how we should be moving.
Supposed to move, yeah.
And it just made sort of a lot of intuitive sense to me. And then from that point, I decided, well, yeah, I'm just gonna forget about barbells. I'm just gonna really get into this and see how far I can go with it. And that was about 8 years ago that I started training with clubs. And then since then, I only train with clubs and kettlebells.
Huh.
Holy,
Yeah. And how does your
interesting.
body feel?
I think good, really good. So I've had shoulder issues before as well, and I think that's because as a young man, you do too much bench pressing, and you guys are still young men, so maybe that's what. But I think you get away with it for a long time. But
Yeah.
like I said, I think after a certain point, just heavy, repetitive, linear movements are just not great for the shoulders. And I haven't had any problems with my shoulders since I started training with clubs. And it feels very counterintuitive because some people think, well, this massive range of motion, especially with a heavy load, aren't you putting too much strain on the shoulders? And then I realized, well, you put massive strain on the shoulders when you bench press and shoulder press. But the difference when you're doing it with a club is that's the way the shoulder, that's what the type of stress the shoulder was designed for. You are designed to be able to generate huge amount of throwing power and striking power. So when you're training with a club, what you're doing is actually, it's very natural. Your shoulders are not designed for supporting a huge amount of weight overhead.
Right.
I definitely believe that. And even though you can get away with it, I think if that's your main type of upper body training, upward, huge loads, high volumes, repetitive overhead lifting, I think that is what is far more likely to cause problems in your shoulder.
Hmm. Interesting. Wow. So with your clients, to just kind of push this a little further too. So when you
Oh yeah,
train your clients, or maybe even, the more famous individuals that you've trained, do you
yes,
incorporate those sorts of movements with them as well?
absolutely. So this is wonderful. So in China, I managed to let a lot of people know about clubs through my celebrity clients. So with Li Jian,
Mm.
for example,
Okay.
we went to the Great Wall and we shot this club bell workout on the Great Wall, which honestly, it's like a few million people must have seen that in China.
Wow.
So that was hilarious. There's another singer, Joby Tong. She's hugely popular as well. She's like insane,
Mhm.
got an insane number of fans. And I went on a TV show training her with these clubs and had her moving these clubs around. And so, so this is wonderful because a lot of people in China know about clubs through the celebrities that I've worked with in
Yep.
my
Yep.
career. Yeah, yeah. So obviously, a bunch of them then started following me and my workouts too. So then from there, I started to build a good social media following in China. Um, I'll tell you a funny story as well. So in China, like I have, I guess I look Chinese, but I'm not Chinese because I'm half, right? I'm sort of I'm mixed, right? So Chinese people say I look like Jason Statham.
I can see it.
I,
I can
you
see
can
it
see
too.
it. So I find this hilarious too because I've never even thought about that, right? So okay, I'm the Chinese Jason Statham. Okay, this was new. This was knowledge to me. This was fascinating, right?
Hey, now you're
But
gonna get into
so
acting too.
so, exactly. So what I did as kind of as a joke in the beginning, but on my like TikTok, in China we have the same. Obviously, it's an app. So I just put my name as Statham, but I changed the last letter to a V. So like Statham, Sitan V is what it is in Chinese. But that's what I changed my name to on my TikTok,
That's
my Chinese TikTok
funny.
account. And there's people in China who now call me Jason. They yeah, yeah. This is hilarious, right? Because well, I have like a few 100,000 followers on my TikTok in China, and sometimes I'll be just walking down the road and I'll have people, hey, Jason, how you doing?
That's
It still
awesome.
cracks me up. I know, and it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. But yeah, that's just a fun thing for you.
That's awesome. That is too funny. We're gonna have to share that one on our Instagram as a snippet.
By all means, I find it.
Side by side. Basically, up to this point, right? You're heavily involved in the fitness space. You have all these accolades to support it.
Yes.
Now up to present day, what are your goals, right? The next 3 to 5 year window. Where do you want to take this thing, and where are you looking ahead in the future?
So I want to really continue to promote club training.
Mhm.
I think that's what a lot of people would benefit from in their current sort of fitness health routines is learning how to swing clubs. Uh, so I'm going to continue promoting that in China. I have got a certain number of followers and a lot of students now already who started doing clubs, but I feel it's just tip of the iceberg stuff. I really want to see clubs become as popular as kettlebells, for example, are now. Kettlebells are now
Mhm.
almost in every gym in China.
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
really well used devices, and I think clubs should be the same. So how to do that? Well, I think I need to keep working with uh, well-known people and through them, let other people know about it. Competitions. I've been doing my best to try and organize a few competitions in club swinging in China as well in the last few years, which is which is challenging, I would say, because it's
Mhm.
not a it's well, it's got a very interesting, like I was saying, like in Iran and in India, it's got this long history of
Mhm.
people using clubs, and they have competitions there. to see who can swing for the most number of repetitions in a certain amount of time. Uh, but to go into a little bit about competition for clubs. So believe it or not, club swinging was also an Olympic event at one point in history. It was one point, it was widely practiced in the United States as well. So 1904, 1932, club swinging was twice an Olympic event, but the way they competed in the Olympics was more for aesthetic beauty, beautiful movement. So they would be using
Oh,
light clubs and swinging them in beautiful patterns. Okay.
oh,
So you've got these two different styles of competition. One of them is just literally how strong you are, how, you can, using these massive clubs and see how many reps you can do in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. And the other one is using these light clubs and just doing beautiful movements. And I actually love both. So I think people should learn to do both. They should train with some heavy clubs to get full strength and conditioning, and they should also get super creative with clubs and try to put together some beautiful movement. So that's the type of I want to try and do like those kind of integrated kind of competitions. I think would be really cool. Would be really cool, and I really hope to be able to work with some coaches in other parts of the world. So, because I know there's a lot of coaches who have similar way of thinking and
mhm,
even have maybe a different type of what could become some type of international sport, which involves clubs rather than like so now if we look at the main types of competition for people who enjoy fitness, right? You got your CrossFit, you've got like Spartan races, you've got High Rocks. I guess these are the biggest ones in China. I guess that's
mhm.
similar in the US. But
100% the same
I,
thing. Yeah.
I love them all as well. I think they're great, but none of them have these clubs in them. None of them have clubs in them. And what I've to just imagined, what I thought would be really cool is to have a competition which involved uh, so similar like philosophy to CrossFit, where you're doing a series of events together in one workout, but those sort of challenges, those sort of things involve different types of clubs, maces, and kettlebells. I think would
Mhm.
be pretty
Wow.
hilarious. Yeah. So for example, you do your 400-meter run, and then you've got to use a mace bell and do like 100 360s, and then you run, and then you come back, and then you've got to get a club and start doing some swipes. Yeah, yeah. I think actually, if this is a real like just a dream, but to try to create competition, which I think it more closely reflects how our bodies are designed. Because I feel that
Mhm.
still like with a lot of a lot of CrossFit, it still is heavily influenced from even though it says it's about functional training and about doing natural movements. I think it's still heavily influenced from bodybuilding. Otherwise,
Mhm.
how could there be so many barbell movements in CrossFit? I just don't see how natural a barbell is in terms of
Mm.
human movement. So that would be I mean that's something I'm going to be working on is to try to create competitions with club bells, and maces to promote this as a way of training and try and establish some competitions. So I'm actually doing a trip to the US and Canada in February. So I'm going to be,
Okay.
yeah. So I'm going to be. I'll mention. Don't mind. I'll mention this as well. I'll be teaching a half-day workshop in New York on the 2nd of February, and then going over to Vancouver and teaching a full 2-day club bell work certification on the 6th and 7th of February. And
That's
Awesome.
awesome.
yeah, I'm really excited about that. And as as as, as much as I'm excited about getting to meet people, fitness goers in US and Canada, it's also then talking with coaches in the US and Canada and getting to hear their thoughts as well on the future of clubs and maces because It's still quite niche, but maybe there's a possibility that we can work out a sort of a type of competition format which could be used everywhere to
Hmm.
to compete with these things, and that would be another way of just letting more people know about it. Because sometimes you need that. You need that kind of competition, like American Ninja Warrior, right? To get more people interested in
Yeah.
doing this kind of crazy type of training. Well, you
Yeah.
need you need like something. You need a competition to let people know about it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
mean, I think every industry needs a trailblazer, right? And every new thing that comes
yeah,
out, there's always that one person that takes it to the next step. So, who knows? You never know where the road takes you.
absolutely.
Yeah. But we always like to end our episodes with one piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice that can add value to the listeners on our journey. I know that's a fully loaded question, and I know a lot
Absolutely.
of the stories that you've shared here today are pieces of that. But if you had a couple main pieces of advice, what would it be?
Well, that's a good one. Really good one. Ah, well, there's so many I could choose, and from my own experience relate to. Uh, I will say, as I maybe this is just a bit of a general one, but uh, try something new every year that you're afraid of.
Hmm.
Okay, and
I like
yeah, yeah, really, really, I feel this is so true. But like, I see it so much happening in I'm 46 now, and I still force myself to go and learn new sports, and I try and do something every year. Recently I did some rock climbing, tried some jujitsu. I competed in my first Spartan race at the age of whatever, 40 something. I feel like you've got to go and do these things. You really do. You really do.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you convince yourself in a way that, oh, I can only do this much. I can only do this much,
that.
and it's not really. You're still capable of learning new movements in your 40s, 50s, 60s if you force yourself to.
Hmm.
You've just got to be brave though. You've got to be brave enough to try it. You got to be brave enough to try it. So I think apart, then there's real value then as well in doing things like having this kind of podcast people listen to so they can get inspiration and reading about people like read about David Goggins or whoever someone who's kind of crazy, right? Uh,
Read his books? Have you read
I've
his new
read,
book?
yeah, yeah. He's just nuts, right? So
Great book.
you've got to do this. You've got to read Wim Hof, read David Goggins, read about guys who've really tested the limits of where the human could go, and then force yourself to, I mean, you don't have to do something as crazy as Goggins or Wim Hof, but at least, there could be something like, like it could be as simple as, okay, next year I'm going to learn yoga, right? At
Mm-hmm.
least force yourself then to go and do something, to learn some new type of movement, because for sure you will get something out of it and it will have a lasting benefit to you.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think, and that's where growth occurs is getting
Yeah,
uncomfortable, trying something new, and just to be able to challenge yourself, like you said, once a year, try something new.
absolutely.
The growth and the compounding effect over a number of years, what you're able to learn is pretty substantial. So I think that's awesome.
For real.
Yeah, good stuff, Victor. Well, we wish you nothing but the best of luck on this journey. Where we're going to be sure to follow along closely. And honestly, I'm gonna start swinging some clubs for sure. I'm gonna give it a shot. See how it
Nice.
goes.
Nice. If there are any good experienced coaches in your area, that will help you a lot, save you a lot of
I'm sure it would.
like probably knocks to the face.
Yeah.
so, so
Yeah.
yeah. Where exactly are you guys again? You're on the East Coast, right?
Yep. So we're in Maine. So southern Maine. Yeah. So on the east
Okay.
coast of the United States. Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. All right. Well, look forward to seeing your club swinging posts in the future.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep you posted as the we get ready to release the podcast and everything like that. We'll share a bunch of snippets. And we'll make sure to keep you in the loop on all that stuff as we start to edit and release it.
Okay, awesome.
All right, Victor. Well, you have a good one, and we'll be in touch soon.